I honestly think there's something seriously wrong with the religious. Some are obviously worse than others, but today we're going to see an extreme case. And then you're going to realize that a lot of theists that we see around here, they're not that far off that. This is going to be really pathetic, so get ready. This is just how they are. I'm going to apologize up front for putting all of you through this, but if I had to suffer, hey, so do you. I know how this started off, but this time it gets worse. Far worse. There is an important lesson to be learned here, especially for the religious, but I doubt that most of them will have any interest. So get your Thorazine ready, because this is going to be rough.
They simply lack the capacities to overcome their sensory prison. Sensing types cannot transcend their senses, and that's why that can have no access to the transcendent order.
That you haven't proven is even a thing, because this is something else that's wrong with Christians. They are convinced, for no good evidence-based reason, that the shit in their heads is actually true. This is what happens when you're deluded out of your gourd by your pre-existing beliefs to the point that you can't step back and examine where you're going wrong. Lately, I've been wondering why virtually every theist that ever calls shows like the Atheist Experience of the Line, why are those people all idiots? Because you don't get the really intelligent Christians, if there are any, you just get the morons. Because I can think of very, very, very few calls that aren't. They call with, well, here's the stuff that I believe, and when the hosts completely demolish that, they just go back to it time and time and time again. But I believe it. Yeah, you're an idiot. What you want to be true isn't true just because you want it to be. You are starting with conclusions that you cannot defend rationally, and the second that someone calls you out on it, you just whine. They never say, well, here's the evidence that I have that proves that any of this is true. Let's go ahead and examine it together. Because they have no evidence. They have nothing at all. They just really like the idea, and that will never, ever, ever be enough. There is something seriously wrong with you. Knock it off.
These people are very limited people.
Okay, wait. What does that sentence even mean? These people are very limited people. That isn't proper English at all. Yes, I know I'm nitpicking and I'll stop, but seriously, how can you make a video for a supposedly English-speaking audience if you can't speak the damn language yourself? It just makes you look dumber than you already are. Anyway, back to the video. This just drives me crazy.
Restricted to the immanent order and unable to comprehend transcendence.
Because there's no demonstrable thing like transcendence. It's just what you want to be true. Now, we see this all the time. You'll get theists saying, well, there has to be something that justifies objective morality, or there just has to be something that justifies the laws of logic. Says who? Because first off, objective morality isn't real. No matter how much you really, really wish that it was, it isn't. The laws of logic are something that we observed in nature, and then we just codified it into something that makes sense to us. We have never once seen a thing that was both A and not A at the same time and in the same way. We can't even imagine what something like that would look like. Therefore, we just formalized it as a law of logic and just assumed that that's the case universally. And it might not be, we just don't know. Just like when we assumed that Newtonian physics was the case across the board, right up until we got to black holes. There could be a case out there where the laws of logic break down. We just don't know. Nothing that we are saying is demonstrably universal. However, Until we get there, we just have to go with the observations that we've made, because in 100% of the cases so far, they've held up. That doesn't mean that a God is responsible any more than a God is responsible for the speed of light in a vacuum. Well, God makes light go that speed. Yeah, prove it. Don't assert it. Prove it. And this is where the religious break down every single time, because they can't prove it. All they have are their bald assertions, their childish fifis, and their blind faith. And that is not good enough. It just isn't.
Isn't that so sad? What monochrome, tedious lives these people have.
Oh yes, it's so sad to actually have the truth and not just your ridiculous imagination. But don't you really want to believe in a God? No, I want to accept the best explanation for truth that we currently have based on the strongest evidence that we can currently come up with, understanding that things could change in the future because that's how reality works. Your wishes and your dreams don't mean anything. This is laughably fallacious, but the religious don't care, do they? They are just looking for fifis and faith. What a bunch of complete morons these people are.
One ought to feel so sorry for atheists. Is it not pathological behavior to deny meaning, purpose, and point, to deny free will, to dismiss the reality of mind, to ignore the unconscious, and characterize consciousness as some weird and inexplicable or emergent phenomenon of material activity?
If that's what's actually going on, no, of course not. What kind of frickin' imbecile are you? Now, I've said many times before that we're not speaking the same language as the religious, and I think this is a perfect example. They are only talking feelings. Does this thing make me happy? They don't care if it's actually true or not. They only care if it makes them comfortable. This is the very definition of delusion. A delusion is a false belief or judgment about external reality held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, occurring especially in mental conditions. Sorry, but believing in the absence of any corroboratory evidence in support of delusion is delusion, especially when such evidence would be expected or when evidence to the contrary is absolutely present. It doesn't matter what you really want to be true. It only matters what actually is. This is where the whole maturity thing enters in. Now, this is kind of frustrating because I was going to provide a definition for maturity, just like I did for delusion, but every dictionary that I looked at, they define maturity as the state of being mature, which is kind of dumb. I mean, talk about being circular. The best I could find is the quality of behaving mentally and emotionally like an adult. But that's not really much better, is it? It doesn't define what behaving like an adult actually encompasses. I could tell you what I mean by that, but there would sadly be a lot of disagreement down in the comments, wouldn't there? It's just being able to deal with the reality in which you live in a way that is realistic and evidentially supported. And that is absolutely not what the religious do.
Atheists deny their own free will and that of everyone else.
Clearly not. I mean, there are people who don't think that there is free will at all, but I'm not one of them. I figure this is another instance of a theist not bothering to run any of this past any actual atheists, which they should definitely do. They don't care what's actually true. They're just running on fifis and faith. So long as it sounds good to the theists, other theists, it's got to be good enough for them. Because everybody's just like they are, right? Except that's stupid. Again, you have to care what is actually true in demonstrable reality, not the silly happy land that you've invented in your head. The religious seem to have a real problem with that, don't they? Lots of people do. Lots of people are delusional. And that's kind of sad, right?
They deny their own minds and those of everyone else. They say that we are either deterministic machines, the old scientific view, or indeterministic casino creatures, the new scientific view.
I don't even know what that means. We are just one hyper-egotistical evolved species on an irrelevant planet in the middle of an irrelevant solar system, desperately looking for a way to feel good about ourselves and our place in the universe. That's why we tend to make shit up. That doesn't change the fact that it's all just made up, though, and completely without rational merit. So you get one group of people saying, we're special, without any evidence whatsoever to back it up, and another saying, prove it, knowing full well that the first group has no interest nor capacity to do that at all. And they don't care either, which is the real sad bit. Now, we can explain why. There are cultural and biological reasons for it all, but it doesn't get them any closer to being able to deal with factual reality, does it? In the modern world, it causes problems for all of us. In the middle of a natural disaster, sitting there with your hands clenched, talking to yourself, that doesn't help the situation. You have to get off your knees and get the work done, and religion has traditionally just been an excuse for putting the actual work off on others, whether those others exist at all. God will provide has never once in history been demonstrably true. It's an excuse to keep from having to do the work yourself, and those people can go out and go fuck themselves, can't they?
They say that existence randomly comes from non-existence. They even deny causation and replace it with statistics and probabilities.
In other words, they understand how reality works. That's why the religious tend to be really, really ignorant. They've got this laughably simplistic view in their heads about how things supposedly go down, and while the rest of us are out there actually figuring stuff out, they just sit back on their butts in the pews talking to themselves as if that contributes one bit to knowledge or advancement. Religion has never once, not ever, come to a factually correct view on its own. That, especially in the modern world, has been the purview of science. Religion has no verifiable methodology for coming to demonstrable truth. They just really want to believe.
Is any of this symptomatic of a healthy mind and healthy thinking?
Absolutely it is. Healthy minds don't just invent farcical realities and then pretend that they're real. That's all the religious are doing. Healthy minds don't rely on feelings to determine facts about reality. That's all the religious are doing. Healthy minds do not pretend that some magical man in the sky will do all the heavy lifting so they don't have to do any of it on their own. And that's all the religious are doing. I think you can see my point here. However, humanity also has a lazy streak a mile wide, and we've spent a lot of time just pretending that this stuff works. It doesn't, but we like to play make-believe. Sometimes, often through slavery and guilt trips, the religious have been able to make it work by forcing the work onto others. But as I said before, not once in demonstrable history has God ever shown up, done anything, and the religious been able to prove it. And I'm talking about any God of any kind for any group of people, because that has never happened, not once. Oh, the religious like to play make-believe, I found my car keys, therefore God done it. But that doesn't make it God. It's not like you just stood there with your hand out expectantly and the keys just dropped into your palm. You actually had to go and look, and then when you found them, you just gave the credit to somebody else who didn't do anything at all, or even demonstrably exist. I mean, seriously, how dumb are these people?
Or does it denote nothing but irrational devotion to the limited, fallible, unreliable, delusional human senses?
Why does that feel like he's just talking about himself? Because these idiots project with the best of them. Now, this is a very human thing. If you watch people screaming that the opposition did X, you can be pretty sure that, if you look close enough, they're doing the exact same thing and just turning a blind eye to it. That's how it almost always works. It's a way to get people onto your side if you can just demonize the other side and pretend that they're doing something wrong, even though you're doing it too. Because it isn't the thing that's wrong, it's the fact that they disagree with you. Religion represents the very worst impulses of humanity, and that's not something to be proud of.
Are sensing types on The spectrum. Do they have a serious lack in relation to their capacity to think, feel, and intuit?
No, this is just ridiculous. We've got the thinking part down pat. We understand that feeling and intuiting are inferior methods of coming to grips with demonstrable reality. The religious really need to figure that part out, although I think we all know that they can't. It would hurt their childish we don't fee-fees, and they can't have that. They don't want to deal with the real world, even though they don't really have much of a choice, do they? They'd rather just make excuses for why things don't go their way than to deal with the demonstrable facts and understand that real success comes with hard work and realistic expectations, and sadly, they want nothing at all to do with any of that, do they?
Are they very strange people who can almost be regarded as soulless people?
Welcome to Poisoning the Well 101. Because you notice the one thing that he hasn't even tried to do yet, right? He hasn't tried to prove any of his bald assertions are actually true. He hasn't tried to provide any evidence because he can't defend his own side. He just feels it, so it's just got to be true. So he has to attack the other side, but he can't do that successfully either. This is something else that I've pointed out many times before, how they will say, well, if you're being honest or if you're not insane, and then they will just imply that the only rational position one can have is theirs. And anybody who disagrees, well, they've just got to have something wrong with them, right? It's really laughable, but again, this is pretty common in humans, religious and non-religious alike, which is why I don't care about any of that. Where is your evidence? I don't care about your feelings. I care about your facts. I don't care about your thinly veiled insults. I care what you can back up with verifiable truth, with demonstrable evidence. And people get mad at me for calling these people idiots all the time, but it fits with the definition of the word. This is another one of those words that's kind of hard to come up with a worthwhile definition for, since it tends to be defined in relation to other ill-defined words. An idiot is a stupid person. Yeah, but how do you define a stupid person? Well, they're an idiot. Yeah, that's circular. When I call somebody an idiot, I mean someone who embraces irrational positions when they really ought to know better. There's no excuse for believing this stuff because the evidence just doesn't support it. And if you disagree, all you have to do is present verifiable evidence in support. Go ahead. I dare ya.
People with souls are innately metaphysical, religious, and spiritual.
Now, prove that souls are real. These are all just concepts that you made up in your head that you can't show have any evidential validity. This is just shit you really want to be true. I can do the exact same thing just to show you how stupid it is. Well, you don't have a blah blah blah. Well, okay. Prove that's a real thing. Well, that just proves you don't have one. This is just insane. But that's what the religious really are. Souls mean nothing until you can prove they actually exist. And a couple of days ago, somebody on Reddit asked if I'd be willing to sell them my soul. Hell, take it. I've lost track of how many times over the years that I've sold my soul. I don't care because it's not demonstrably real. If you're willing to exchange money for something that we have no reason to think exists, okay, go ahead, feel free. I'm not defrauding anyone because I'm very upfront that I don't think I have anything to give them, but they say a fool and their money are soon parted, and there seems to be an awful lot of fools out there. And that's not really a good thing, is it?
People without souls are innate atheists.
Then I guess that makes everybody an atheist, because there are no souls demonstrable anywhere. And he says this like he's not insane. People without blah 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 are innate elephants. What does that even mean? Because you're just spouting gibberish. And they wonder why I think they're idiots. This is why. It's really not that hard to understand.
To be a body-focused sensing type has the functional effect of cutting off a person's connection to their soul, which is non-sensory and transcendent. And to make these people atheists and nihilists committed to rubbishing reality as some meaningless way of passing the time.
None of that had any rational validity at all. You can't prove that any of this is even a thing. That's why when the religious spout this nonsense, all atheists can do is say,
"What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?"
this doesn't make any sense. They are speaking a language all their own that makes no sense to anyone else who's outside of their silly irrational cult. Soul is just an invented word, something you just made up in your head, and until you can show us with verifiable evidence that it has any rational meaning in reality, that it can be shown to exist as a discrete demonstrable thing, we are going to conclude that you are insane. This is you saying nonsense words and expecting us to take you seriously. Not gonna happen. Not at all.
It's a wonder all of these people don't kill themselves, but that decision would require non-sensory capacities that these people intrinsically lack.
No, actually, it's a wonder that all Christians don't go out and kill themselves, given what they supposedly think is on the other side of death. Early Christians did that regularly so they could go off and be with Jesus. Why did they stop? Because the church invented an unsupported assertion that suicide was a mortal sin, specifically because they recognized that if all their followers just offed themselves to go be with Jesus, then they'd be out of a job. Let's not fool ourselves. Atheists have no reason to kill ourselves because there's nothing on the other side. This is the only life that we demonstrably get. Christians, though, they supposedly do, although they are strongly discouraged by the people who directly financially benefit from them sticking around from doing so. It's amazing how the religious can't figure this shit out, right? What a bunch of morons.
Catch 22. Should we have a special day each year, Atheist Day, to commiserate with the inability of atheists to engage with transcendent reality?
No, we should spend the entire year laughing at these mental midgets who can't figure out what a bunch of imbeciles they are. We've got all the evidence on our side. They've got nothing but fifis and faith. What the fuck is wrong with these people? Somebody please explain down in the comments, because I'd really love to see what the religious think. Because this is all delusion and insanity. Remember, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. And that describes the religious perfectly. There is something severely wrong with these people's capacity to deal with the world in which they actually live. They are desperate to live somewhere else, and that's just insane. Then they pretend that there's something wrong with us. What, are you looking in the mirror? Because, as I've said before, these people project a lot. They pretend that we're doing what they're doing, and they're not doing what they actually are, because they can't perceive themselves as what's actually true. This is one of the most idiotic videos that I remember doing, at least recently, and this is really what's going on in the heads of a lot of religious morons. These people need help.
Which is, of course, mathematical reality, as per the ontological mathematics of the Illuminati koi. Do the math.
And there you go. This is your cue to start backing away very slowly. This guy is out of his mind, but really, how different is he from other hardcore theists? For any theists out there in the audience, if you looked at this guy and thought he sounded insane, well, that's how you look to everybody else here. I think that's the thing that the religious can't understand. Randall Rouser did a video a while back where he said that the fundamentalists look crazy to everybody else, and I pointed out that he looked the same way to your basic atheist on the street. The second that you take leave of your senses and start believing things for which you can provide no evidential support, then you're nuts. You just are. Everybody looks at you like you look at this guy, and for good reason. This is why I say that you need to take a giant step back and look at how you are evaluating the world absent your fifis and your faith. It doesn't matter how it makes you feel. It matters if it's actually real, and defensibly and demonstrably so. And for far too many people, they just don't give a shit. This guy thinks he's rational. He's not. He's out of his ever-loving gourd, but he thinks he's fine. Just because you think you're fine, that doesn't mean that you are. The asylums are full of people who think they're perfectly fine. That's why you have to be able to back up your claims beyond how you feel about stuff. And sadly, the religious, generally speaking, can't. And that's why I asked them how they know the stuff they claim to know. I'm not asking what you think. I'm not asking what you feel. I'm asking for your external evidence that any of the crap in your head is actually and demonstrably true. That way, I can go out and test your evidence for myself and see if you have anything to write home about. And if you have no evidence, then you shouldn't believe any of this crap either. Not that most theists really care, because most theists, they're out of their ever-loving minds. Don't be like them. Be a whole lot better.